So here's the finished product, guys. Got it outside here in the sunshine. Hey guys, this is Nathan Storch with The Way I Do It, and this is the first part of a two-part video series I'm going to make showing you guys how to put feather backings on a wooden bow. And so in this video, I'll be going over some of the preparation and the application of the feathers. And then in the second video, which is going to be coming out really soon, I'll go over more of the application and the detailed work, the trimming and the final coatings, and the stuff that really makes the bow pop. This elm bow I'm going to be working on is basically finished. I've done all the tillering, I've done the heat adjustments. There's nothing else major that's going to go into this bow except for the backing. And that's really important. You don't want to be making heat adjustments after you've put the backing on. Most likely, especially if you have to apply heat, you're going to destroy that backing. Now, if you have to do a little bit of slight tillering, I think you're going to be fine. And another thing is, you don't want to put the amount of work that goes into putting a feather backing on a bow that's not completed, because as we all know, sometimes we find flaws in bows and we can't use them, or that they break during the tillering process. And so I don't recommend putting that level of detail into something that you're not confident in its success yet. Okay, so before you guys start getting into your feathers, I recommend that you make sure your work area is clean. So if you have any sawdust or any small particles on your bench, get those vacuumed off. They will stick to your feathers and ruin your finish if you don't get them out. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the feathers. If any of you guys are turkey hunters or know any turkey hunters, then you have access to feathers. These are the parts that 99% of people throw away. These are the body feathers, and with a little bit of work, you can really make a bow that shines. Now when you're selecting the feathers, they're not all created equal. Different parts of the gobbler's body has a different color to it. You've got some like these that are more purple. I think these come more from the sides of the gobbler. They're not quite as flashy, but they got that purple hue, and they're just darker overall. And then you've got the feathers that are extremely flashy, like these. And you can get colors ranging from greens to oranges out of the same feather, depending on how the light hits it. If you want something that's flashy, that's really gonna turn people's heads, this is what you're looking for. So not all these feathers will be good. So when you're making a pile and selecting the ones you want to keep, the first thing I look for is color. Does it have the colors I want? And then the second thing is I'm looking for damage. You know, if you get one like this, it's not really damaged so much, but it's really kind of out of shape, and you might be able to fix it. But if you have a pile of feathers, it's really not worth your time messing with these, because these gaps are going to show white wood underneath them if you lay these down and you don't have them completely put back together. So sometimes you can kind of heal them up like that, but at the same time, if you put them down on the bow and you go to try to mess with them, they just get worse. So if you have any like this, I would just toss them. So here's a good one. It's got good color. It's in pretty good shape. It's going in the keep pile. 99% of the damage comes when you shoot the bird. Usually after I shoot one, if I'm able to, the first thing I do is I go jump on it and I hold that thing down so that in its throes of death it can't flop violently around and damage the feathers. Alright, so I've got the feathers sorted out that I'm going to use for the back of the bow. You want to make sure you have plenty of feathers ready to go. So I think I've got more than I need here. If I have to go back and trim a few more, that's not going to hurt anything. Now what we have to do is come in here and start trimming these. And so most of this is waste. You just don't need it. What I'm going to do is you come down here, and then you have to follow the the quill or the feathers. You have to follow the feathers because you can see here, if you cut this here, that's going to take this feather all the way up to there. So you have to be conscious of how much of this you want on the bow. And I usually cut them so that the feathers that start to fray, I know for a fact those aren't going to be seen on the bow. I don't want them seen. So I'll cut them right there to start. And that's pretty big. More than likely, I'm going to cut that down a little bit more when I go to put it on the bow. But that's a good start. Just get rid of the majority of the feather that you don't need. Cut it off and toss it in the trash. So these are the portions I will be putting on the back of the bow here, and then this is scrap that was cut off of that. If you have a use for that, then you can do whatever you want with these at this point, and I throw them in the trash. It doesn't matter which limb you start on. You can start on the top limb or the bottom limb. They're both going to be done separately. The main thing that you need to do, though, is start at the top of each limb. So start towards the tip and work your way down. The reason that's important is because you're going to layer them. So you're going to put them on like that. Then you're going to take your next one. It's going to go like that. As you lay these things down, they're going to continually layer down, almost like scales. So this is a good time to take your feathers that you have, and you can kind of place them a little bit and see what kind of pattern you want to do, or maybe even see if you have enough. You might be able to tell at this point that you need to go back into your feather bag and trim some more up. One thing you're going to have to do is decide where to start. Now on all three of my bows that I've built with feathers, I've actually started them right here, just below the tip overlay. But I've seen some bows with snake skins and fish skins that start further down. And I think I'm going to do that on this bow because that actually looks pretty good. And I think seeing the wood next to the feathers will kind of offset each other, and it'll really pop. So you guys can see these feathers are really shiny. Hopefully I got enough that look like that, and if I don't, I've got at least 2, maybe 3 more bags of feathers I can go dig into. So I'm going to be applying the feathers with Flex Coat Light. It's actually a fishing rod epoxy, so it's very flexible even after it cures, and that's really important. For this project, it will keep the feathers secured to the bow, but also allow for some flex. If you use a finish that dries too hard, it'll crack, and over time it will look pretty bad. My first bow, I used True Oil as a finish, and it actually held up for 200 or 300 shots. But after a lot of use, the finish began to crack, and really it just looks quite bad now. It's still holding, but it doesn't look good. So I highly recommend using this stuff right here. This is the best stuff you can use for putting feathers on a bow. And it doesn't take very much. This right here is enough to do several bows. As a matter of fact, I'm not even going to break into this package. I've got some that I used on my last 2 bows, and you can see how much I've got left. I did 2 bows, and they were smaller bows, but I did 2 bows this spring, and this is what I've got left out of them. So the recommendation is to stir this for 2 to 5 minutes. Don't use any porous objects when stirring it. When you measure it out, they suggest to use a syringe that's made for it, because silicone can interact with this stuff and mess it up. And I guess medical syringes have silicone in them. When it's thoroughly mixed, becomes clear again. This is getting clear. There are some bubbles in it, but the bubbles will come out as I brush it on. On your first feather, you want to make sure there's no parts or splits or damaged parts of it. Otherwise, the wood will show under it and it'll be hard to cover that up. And then you got to decide where you want to start the feather. I'm going to start mine right here about 6 inches down. And so what I'm going to do now is take some of this epoxy and just start applying. So after you put some on there, I like to start kind of farther up, lay it down, and you just kind of give it a little tug. Just kind of pat it on there, just like that. If you come in here and start pulling on it too much, you'll split these feathers and you'll have a hard time getting them to get back together. As a matter of fact, if you mess it up, you're better off to just pull the feather off and start over. You want to make sure there's no air bubbles underneath it. Those would be places where it's not really attached very well. And then you're going to keep going down the bow. Just come down here, apply some more. And this solution is very runny, so you got to keep an eye on it. It's going to want to run down the bow on you and drip off the sides, so you got to stay ahead of that. Now I'm going to place some on here. And you'll see why here in a second. Grab your next feather. There you go. And just keep going. I just ran out of epoxy. I didn't mix up enough to completely finish this limb. I did get pretty close. This is all fresh still. It is starting to set up. One issue I see is I'm getting bubbles underneath these feathers, and definitely not a good thing. You want that feather to be attached securely to the wood. So as it cures, I'm going to keep pushing this down and holding it, the treble spots. I'm going to push them down just to make sure, like right there, you can see one. See, we have one. Press it, try to get it to stick to the wood. I've got epoxy under it. The problem is going to be that there's minor ridges on the back of this bow because it's an elm bow, and I sanded down some of them, but you can see these ridges create low spots between them, and it's those low spots that are the problem. But overall, this is feeling pretty tight. I think it's gonna turn out good. Okay guys, so it was at this point in the build that I made a horrible decision and just a horrible mistake on this bow. On a lot of bows, if you're gluing down a snake skin or a rawhide or sinew backing, it's good to wrap those while they're drying so that you press it against the wood and it holds it in place while the glue dries. That was a bad idea because what I'm working with is epoxy, and for some reason that did not click with me while I decided to do this. So I went upstairs and I grabbed some parchment paper. I'm going to try that. I just want to see how it sticks, or if it's, I'm going to see if it will, if I can wrap it without tearing it all up. Hopefully without the feathers gluing down to the paper. That was a bad idea. That definitely made things worse. One important thing about being able to build your own bows is that you learn really quick you can fix mistakes that you make. You know, the mistake I made was not the end of the bow, it wasn't the end of the backing. So I'm going to show you guys in the next video how I fixed the mistake and how I finished the backing, and then show you the detail work that goes into trimming and just making an absolutely stunning and beautiful bow. So thank you guys for sticking with me. If you would, please consider subscribing, and I'm going to get that next video out just as soon as I get done processing it. So thank you guys for watching.